All right, everybody, thanks for coming out today. I think this is going to be a really fascinating lecture here. We have the principal of the Blue Economy Agency here, Sandra Ponce de Leon, and very happy to have her here. Came down from the Bay Area, and she's been in the blue tech space for a number of years, and is kind of going to give us a survey of kind of a lot of the kind of blue tech innovations that are going to kind of solve a lot of the kind of marine conservation challenges. So let's give her a warm welcome.
Thank you so much. First of all, it's a huge honor to be here. I'm so excited, and thank you, Jason, for having me. I'm happy to be here with all of you to share some of the amazing innovations that are happening in the world of technology for the benefit of the oceans. But first, the bad. Every day we're seeing fatalistic new headlines about the state of our oceans. We're emptying our seas of fish because of industrial fishing practices. 90% of the world's coral is expected to be wiped out by the year 2050. And in that same year, we're going to have more plastic in the ocean than fish. Sharks are being hunted for their fins to extinction. Whales are dying from consuming too much plastic. And if the plastic isn't killing them, the sonar from our Navy is. Is anyone else as depressed as I am reading these headlines? Does anyone need a hug? I know I do. So let's think of this presentation as a big, giant group hug to all of you. Hi, everyone. I'm Sandra Ponce de Leon. I'm a Silicon Valley vet, and I have the scars and bruises to show for it. In my career, I've been a marketer, a co-founder, a journalist, and an entrepreneur. I've been through 3 exits, some more successful than others. So why am I here? Well, I rediscovered my love for the oceans a few years ago on a month-long sailing trip through the Caribbean. That trip got me up close and personal with the awe-inspiring beauty of the ocean, its vastness and its power, and also its fragility. Seeing so much beauty and life in some coral reefs, while others were dead zones. I decided then that I didn't want to keep working for companies whose technologies are all about getting you to spend more time on their site or put more stuff in your shopping cart. I wanted to do something more meaningful, and that has led me here to you today, which is something that really makes me super happy. I'm the founder and principal of Blue Economy Agency, which is a marketing and PR agency that's focused on helping companies that are working for the benefit of the oceans. My partner and I recognize that what's critical for these companies, especially many of these early stage startups, is for them to get their messages out. Helping them get their messages out expands awareness to the investment community, to their consumers and partners, and ultimately that funding helps them accelerate their innovations. And what we need right now is those innovations more than ever being put to use for the benefit of our oceans, which are in such dire need. So I'm happy to say that I now use my superpowers of marketing, connecting, and amplifying messages for the benefit of the oceans. Given my background in tech, the business development activities I undertake for the agency, the many ocean events I attend, and writing about the latest innovations in blue tech, I see a lot of ocean technologies. So this presentation is meant to shed light on some of those technologies. I mentioned I'm a writer. I write for GritDaily about all things ocean, circular and regenerative economies, and for Forbes I write about all things AI. And as much as possible, I like to explore the intersection of AI with technologies that are helping to solve the major issues that the oceans face. Ultimately, AI is about applying algorithms to large sets of data to make sense of that data. AI recognizes patterns and then takes action if that's part of the programming. But the first step is the data, so it makes sense that we start there first. As Peter Drucker so eloquently put it, you can't manage what you don't measure, and that applies to the oceans. So what can we measure in the ocean? It's so complex and there's so much. The topography, also known as bathymetry, I don't even know if I'm saying that right. The ocean landscape, its seabed, the salinity of the water, its pH, the amount of plastic in the water, the amount of fish, public sentiment, waves, currents, CO2 levels. There's so many initiatives to measure data in the world, I can only touch the surface. So let's take a few examples of what's currently being measured. Aquatica is a very exciting company, also a company that I work with. They're building personally manned submarines with a mission to bring public subsea exploration to the masses. They do expeditions to exciting places and charge thousands of dollars for a seat on these cool vehicles to explore the underwater world. And while the expeditions are something that right now are only for the wealthy, they're about $100,000 a ticket. The idea is that one of these days, or that one day, these trips will be something that anyone on vacation can afford. Or for those that aren't scuba certified, or just love the idea of exploring underwater ocean in a submarine. They're also committed to giving back to the scientific community. They had a recent expedition to the Great Blue Hole in Belize, where they went with the Discovery Channel, Sir Richard Branson, and Fabien Cousteau. And this was also a scientific expedition. They took the first ever digital mapping of the Blue Hole, and they put that data onto the blockchain to make it available and immutable for the scientific community to use and to have access to, with a partnership with a company called GoChain. Saildrone is using autonomous floating solar and wind-powered drones and sending them on expeditions around the world to map ocean currents, fish stocks, CO2 levels. They recently were the first to circumnavigate Antarctica in an autonomous drone. This drone even ran into a huge iceberg and got damaged, but it kept on trekking. They've put their drones out all over the world to take stock of things like Alaskan red king crab populations or collecting atmospheric data. Their vessel, the Falcor, even went to a remote area in the Pacific Ocean that held a mystery of unknown migratory patterns of sharks that all convened in this area, coined the White Shark Cafe because of their numbers. But the area was thought to be an ocean dead zone because the satellite imagery did not capture any signs of life at the surface. With the Falcor, Saildrone and its research partner, Dr. Barbara Block of Stanford University and Schmidt Ocean Institute, were able to see what happens at the White Shark Cafe. And what they saw were sharks that were diving to mid-ocean depths, where there was an abundance of plankton and other food that satellite imagery could not capture. Another cool drone technology is swarm technology, which you may have only seen previously on display at the opening of the Olympic Games in China. The problem, or rather the beauty of the ocean, is that it's fluid, it's ever-changing. So how does one drone take stock of a rapidly changing ocean or identify patterns that are constantly moving, such as fish? Avian Swarm is a company that creates the underlying software that enables command and control of multiple autonomous surface vehicles or even autonomous diving vehicles, as well as flying drones at any one time. Swarm technology makes data collection more effective because it can take an area snapshot that's coordinated with the other vehicles, as opposed to one underwater drone moving from section to section, where everything is constantly changing and moving because of the tides, the seafloor changes, and differences in water makeup. One use case for how Avian Swarm's technology could be used to clean up the oceans would be for oil spills. The Deepwater Horizon spilled 5 million barrels of oil in the Gulf of Mexico in the year 2010. They deployed over 800 skimmer ships for the cleanup, almost all the available types of ship of that kind. But even with those massive resources, they were only able to clean 3% of the total surface oil that was there. It was simply not the right kind of technology for a problem of this kind. With swarm technology and smaller vessels, thousands can be deployed and outfitted with the latest in material sciences breakthroughs to soak up and disperse the oil, with minimal human involvement. And with autonomous robotics, they could work night and day to more effectively clean up a large oil spill of this kind. According to the CEO of Avian, if 500 sea swarm autonomous water drones were used after the Deepwater Horizon spill, they would have collected as much oil in 1 month as was collected in the entire recovery effort. So swarming technology offers huge potential breakthrough for environmental cleanups. Aquai is a company I love because they've employed the use of biomimicry in their technology, a robotic fish. His name is Namu, and they have what they call fish as a service, which is kind of like software as a service. Their mission is to save the seas, and Namu is a robot equipped with cameras and sensors that is currently deployed in aquaculture use cases, specifically penned aqua farms in the Norwegian Sea. and Namu is regularly monitoring the fish in the pen. And the thing that I love is that the fish, unlike with an ROV, which is a remote operated vehicle, or an underwater drone, which looks foreign and weird to the fish actually take to the robotic fish and they befriend Namu because its movements and shapes so closely mirror their own. They're curious and they swim with it. And this enables a company to take even closer readings than an underwater drone would be able to, which normally the fish would swim away from. So applying those learnings, Aquai is able to monitor the fish population and early identify any potential illnesses among the stock, as well as help the aqua farm optimize their feeding. So now that you have all this data, you have it in different places, in blockchain, in private company databases, governmental agencies, and open source, what do you do with it? Sine is a company that is applying machine learning to enable actionable decision-making from the data. It has a database of over 6,000 sources, ranging from IoT sensor data that measures water quality, wave and weather data, as well as shipping vessel locations and ocean acoustics. It's created an AI and machine learning analytics platform for the maritime sector that enables their clients to extract value from the data. For example, a port could employ sensor data that would recognize a pollution or spill in real time and be able to react. Or they could direct shipping lanes so that marine life is less impacted. Their technology can make port logistics more effective and efficient, thereby reducing fuel consumption, risk of collision and spill, as well as impact wildlife. Another use case is for acoustic pollution, which really hardly receives any attention at all, but is a huge source of harm to underwater marine life. Noise in water travels hundreds of miles and at 5 times faster than in the air. It not only disturbs large cetaceans, such as what we've seen in the large beaching events of whales and dolphins, but also disrupts all other types of underwater wildlife, such as fish and their larvae, and that puts the entire underwater ecosystem at risk. The additional sound energy introduced into the ocean during things like new port construction, additional vessels and shipping lanes, and open water construction, such as for offshore wind farms, can cause huge amounts of harm to marine life. Using Sine to detect underwater wildlife can help these companies make decisions with wildlife protection as a priority. With Sine, companies in transportation, energy, fisheries, subsea telecom, underwater cable networks, and ports can apply machine learning algorithms to correlate relevant information to their businesses for real-time decision-making, insight into operational efficiencies, and reductions in cost as well as environmental harm. With data established as a baseline to put positive, impactful solutions into place, let's dive into some of the areas of need and concern for the oceans. Ghost fishing nets. These are the most harmful type of plastic in the ocean. There's over 640,000 tons of abandoned fishing gear that are added to the ocean every year. This accounts for about 40 to 75% of the ocean's plastics. Nearly half of all the large plastic that's been found in the North Pacific Gyre, also known as the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, is this ghost fishing gear, according to Wade. These ghost fishing nets that have been abandoned continue to do harm to wildlife for years. In fact, 30% of all the fish that are caught in ghost nets, meaning that we are depleting the ocean even more than we thought through overfishing and illegal fishing activities, and we'll get into those as well. These fishing nets don't discriminate over the wildlife they ensnare. 136,000 whales, dolphins, seals, and turtles are caught in ghost gear every year. The loss of marine life through these ghost nets is exacerbating the other issues ocean life faces, and it's also at a cost to the fishing industry. Blue Ocean Gear has developed a very simple yet effective solution that employs a smart buoy system to identify where the gear is, so fishermen can find it easily. It's a smart buoy that's equipped with IoT sensors that can track fishing gear and traps, which helps fishing fleets reduce their costs and become more efficient by preventing the gear loss, as well as fuel spent looking for missing gear and reduced harvest potential from the ghost fishing. It can also take analytical data that can identify seasonal trends and help optimize and encourage sustainable fishing practices. Also, fishermen can now assist marine mammal rescue teams by providing the coordinates of this entangled gear. Assured is another company that's developing an alternative fishing net. It's a ropeless fishing system. It's called the Moby, and it gets called by ship signal to come to the surface. It's activated on demand by the fishing vessel. It also uses machine learning to track key variables such as location, date, weather, tides, and water temperature. By using this historical catch data, Assured will be able to provide lobster and crab fishermen with recommendations as to the most effective and efficient conditions and locations to drop their traps, thus increasing their yields as well as income. Another cool thing about Assured is that they can retrofit existing lobster and crab traps with this underwater buoy release system that they've developed, meaning that fishermen can cost-effectively transition into sustainable fishing practices without having to get new equipment. Their systems are activated via acoustics with a backup timer, and this permits the buoy and connecting rope to rise to the surface where fishermen can use existing onboard equipment and processes to retrieve the traps and then prepare them for redeployment. Assured's Moby uses machine learning to collect data and make recommendations while using sonar and geo-tracking to locate lost traps. The Ocean Voyages Institute out of Sausalito took a simple and somewhat low-tech approach to attacking the problem of ocean plastic. Ocean Voyages decided that it was going to specifically clean up a portion of the plastic that is currently in the North Pacific Gyre, what's known as the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. Their approach was to arm sailors headed from California to Hawaii with buoyant GPS trackers the size of bowling balls to attach to ghost nets that they encountered along their voyages so that they could be tracked down at a later date. A year later, they deployed to the North Pacific Gyre with a cargo ship where they tracked down the ghost fishing nets via GPS coordinates, and they were able to haul out 40 tons of plastic, which was then separated, and some of the plastic was donated to local artists to transform it into art, to educate people about the ocean plastic pollution problem, and the rest of the refuse was turned over to a zero-emissions energy plant that processes waste and turns it into energy. The group plans to deploy dozens more GPS trackers and next year embark on a 3-month trash collection expedition. Ocean Voyages Institute has also partnered with Ben LeCompte, who you might know of Vortex swim fame, the man who swam 230 days in the Pacific to raise awareness around plastic pollution, and I believe he also placed some trackers on their behalf. Coral bleaching. The truly tragic stat that I started with at the beginning of my presentation is true. I've actually spoken with several researchers that confirm that even if we were to stop all of our fossil fuel activity today, we're still on track to lose 90% of the world's coral. And some say it could even be worse. In recent years, we've seen more severe coral bleaching events than ever before, and more frequently, 5 times more than 40 years ago. Coral reefs are home to 25% of all marine species, and they're a food source to 1 billion people. They also provide flood protection worth $1.8 billion every year. Their biodiversity has helped researchers make discovery for new drugs to treat cancer, Alzheimer's, heart disease, and viruses. And that amounts to about 11.9 trillion of the global economy. I want to mention here that not all solutions to the ocean's problems are technical ones. The ocean's health can also be improved through ecological and scientific breakthroughs. So in spite of the title of this talk, I want to share some of those breakthroughs that scientists are making every day in the areas of coral regeneration and resilience. I also think that the blend of ecological solutions plus technical ones is very exciting. How can those breakthroughs be combined with technology like AI to expand, accelerate, and grow them? So I recently got to hear Dr. David Vaughan speak at the UN Climate Summit just last week at a Mastermind for Monaco Better World Forum, which is also a company that I work with. He's the founder of the Plant a Million Corals organization, and he shared how he had mistakenly discovered a new breakthrough in coral regeneration. He's a longtime coral researcher that's been studying how to make coral grow in normal science environments. Coral growth is a painstaking process that takes years for coral to mature and make it to full size. Through a fluke in his lab one day, when he was moving coral from one tank to another, one of the corals broke, and a piece was left in the tank. He thought it was lost for good, and he forgot about it for a couple weeks. When he went back to check on it weeks later, it had grown back to the same original size. He discovered that much like the body puts all its attention onto healing a wound, coral fragments are healed in the same way, and they grow up to 25 times faster than normal and unharmed coral. Then, when those pieces are placed together, also because they come from the same family, they fuse together and they can regenerate even faster, up to 50 times the normal rate. As I mentioned, I love the idea of technology and how it can be coupled with scientific breakthroughs to accelerate and scale those efforts. So how can a technology like AI be used to quickly identify which coral is going to be more resilient to higher water temperatures, or what pH levels of water are most amenable to growth? Here I am at an ocean tech conference earlier this year, playing with Olis Robotics' telerobotics arm. They have a technology that was born out of the surgical robotics industry that they're now applying to the maritime sector to enable remote work in areas that are too dangerous for humans to go. So imagine an underwater pipeline that needs repair. The robot goes down and it sends images of the pipeline back to engineers on land. Those images are 3D rendered, giving a full scope and 360-degree view to the engineer, who can then maneuver the arm in the right place with the remote control to create the right pattern of movements for repair. Then, that sequence gets sent back to the robot underwater, which can then replicate the movement. But also with the use of machine learning and AI, it can react in real time to waves and currents that are impacting its movements. They imagine someday being able to apply this technology to be able to plant corals at scale in impacted bleached areas. With robots, we can go where humans can't. Dumped munitions from world wars have been called the ticking time bomb for the oceans. Olis can also apply this technology to munitions cleanups or toxic sites, such as what we have just off the coast of San Francisco in the Farallon Islands, where it's too dangerous for human divers to go. Oceanographers at Texas A&M University have estimated that at least 31 million pounds of munitions of all types were dumped in waters off 16 states and in the Gulf of Mexico, and that could be a conservative estimate. A company like Olis could be very effective in helping humanity clean our oceans of these ticking time bombs. So next, we're going to see a very cool example of robotics and humans working together, the Ocean One robot out of Stanford Labs. So let's watch the video.
Ocean One is aimed at bringing a new capability for underwater exploration. The intent here is to have a diver diving virtually, creating a robot that can be the physical representation of the human, a humanoid robotic diver that can have bimanual capabilities. So it has two hands, it has stereo vision, and the most amazing thing about it is that you can feel what the robot is doing while it's sitting up on the boat. And this is combining the technology of haptics, that is the idea that we can reflect the contact forces. It's almost like you are there. With the sense of touch, you create a new dimension of perception. This robot is oil-filled. It allows us to take the robot very deep. This robot can go to thousands of meters. And it is truly a human-like machine that is also human-friendly. La Lune is a 17th century shipwreck located about 20 miles off the coast of Toulon in France at 100 meters. In the last year, we have been working and getting our robot ready to take on that expedition. And we are going to land on the moon. More than 70% of the surface of the planet is water. We have a lot of structures, a lot of coral reefs to monitor. We need to reach down there. You can think about it as a solution where we physically extract the human from a dangerous area, but we let the human to be connected to the robot in a very intuitive and meaningful way. And then the human can provide the expertise, the cognitive abilities to the robot, and the two bring together this amazing synergy.
I just love how they've combined so many technologies together with the haptics and the sensor data and robotics. I think it's just so cool. So, overfishing and illegal fishing. Simply put, we are taking more than the ocean is creating. There are now 4 million fishing vessels of all sizes fishing in the ocean. This worldwide fleet is estimated to be 2.5 times the capacity needed to catch what we actually need. Industrialized fishing vessels have the ability to catch huge tonnage of fish in one fell swoop. And so much of this is bycatch that is wasted and then thrown out. We talked about the damage that ghost fishing nets are doing to fish populations. This is compounded by illegal fishing activities or unregulated activities. Experts estimate that illegal, unreported, unregulated fishing nets these criminals $36.4 billion each year. Island nations take the brunt of protecting their coastlines. A small nation like Palau has implemented one of the largest marine protected areas of their coastline, which is 500,000 kilometers or 310,000 miles, as the Palau National Marine Sanctuary. But as you can imagine, for a small island nation with only 20,000 people, this is a huge challenge to patrol and ensure that illegal fishing vessels are not entering their protected waters. It's quite a burden on their Coast Guard and expensive. And as a result, they recently decided to reopen their marine protected area, and they've sold partial fishing rights to Japan in waters that were previously protected. What if they had access to an autonomous vehicle that could patrol their waters for them? This could significantly cut down costs. Enter the Mako, a retrofitted jet ski-like autonomous robot that patrols waters on behalf of governments and scouts illegal fishing vessels. The beauty of the Mako is that it can approach a vehicle without fear of being harmed or endangering its crew. It'll sound the alarm and notify authorities, and it even has the ability to disable the boat so that it can't escape, and the people will be brought to justice and to the authorities. With something like rampant shark finning trade in places that even seem eco-friendly but are run by mafia, this could be a game changer. Everyone here needs to watch the movie Sharkwater Extinction. If you haven't already seen it, it just shows the extent of the decimation of the shark population for something as ridiculous as shark fin soup. So please watch it. It's a very important movie. The beauty of the Mako is that it can also collect ocean data while on patrol. And Jeremy McCain, my friend and the founder of the Ocean Currency Network, is also the creator of the Mako. And he's planning to take this data to help coastal regions put a fair price on their oceans. For example, the Mako can take a proper fish count and create an economic valuation of the reef. And incentivize positive ocean behavior. This data can then be used to track how the marine protected area is performing. Another interesting use case would be to pair the Mako with aerial drones and satellite imagery, which could be very effective in curbing illegal fishing activities. There's another company called Atlan Space out of Morocco that is combining the use of AI and drone technology to spot boats and then use image recognition to identify whether it's a fishing vessel, then using the boat's name, its flag, and the type of radio signals, and attempting to determine whether it's legally permitted to operate in that area or not. Plastic pollution, the big plastic elephant in the room. It's predicted that there will be more plastic than fish in the ocean by the year 2050, which is not surprising given that we're dumping the equivalent of a dump truck of plastic in the ocean every minute. Annually, over 300 million tons of plastic are produced, and 50% of that is meant for only a single use, such as plastic utensils that are used for a takeout meal or the top of a coffee cup. These objects are in use for just a few moments, yet because they're non-biodegradable, they exist on our planet for hundreds or even thousands of years. The amount of plastic reduction this requires means that by 2050, the plastics industry will consume 20% of total oil production and be responsible for 15% of our annual carbon budget. Even if you're a conscious consumer, as I know many of you are here, and you're making efforts to reduce your consumption of plastics, you soon realize that plastic is everywhere. Everywhere you look, and it's next to impossible to escape. In fact, plastic is so pervasive that we eat it and breathe it every day without even knowing it. Thankfully, alternatives to plastic are on the rise, as are ways to reuse it. And there's more examples of use cases for the circular economy being created every day. Decomer is a company developing an alternative plastic packaging material that's plant-based and water-soluble. And it can actually be tuned to react to liquids with different speeds from 3 to 20 minutes. Honey Drops was launched as their first proof of concept. Honey Drops are honey wrapped in Decomer's product that dissolve when applied to hot water. Decomer plans to sell its plant-based packaging to major CPG brands to develop its own private label packaging and target agricultural and pharmaceutical industries, in addition to exploring its own line of products, such as what it's done with Honey Drops. Saberware. This is also not a tech solution, but I love the ingenuity of it. Why aren't we eating all of our single-use utensils instead of resorting to plastics? Saberware has designed edible spoons that come in all different flavors, from savory to sweet. These college kids started baking spoons and experimenting with different yeast and flavors in their college apartment by using actual spoons as molds and cooking different recipes in them. Now they're selling these spoons to frozen yogurt shops, coffee shops, and places that sell soup. Who wouldn't pay an extra 75 cents or $1 for a flavored spoon if it meant not taking a piece of plastic that could end up in the ocean? MIIS. MIIS is a company I just found out about. She just won the James Dyson National UK Award for 2019. And I love it because it's a wonderful example of circular economy. Fish waste produced annually can amount to 50 million tons worldwide. In just the UK, 172,000 tons of fish waste is produced by fish processing annually. Lucy Hughes, who's pictured here, was a student at the University of Sussex studying design, and she got inspired by the very stat that we started with, that there would be more plastic than fish in the ocean by 2050. So she started by looking at waste as a solution, and in her research she came across the fishing industry and its waste byproduct. She connected with a fish processing plant and a wholesaler in the UK and identified the fish waste of fish skins and scales to have the most potential in them because of their flexibility and their strength. And through a process of over 100 experiments, she found a binder that worked. MIIS is completely made from all natural products and biodegrades naturally in 4 to 6 weeks. It's super exciting to see these solutions that are so close to hitting the market now, even as early as next year. So now it's up to us as consumers to demand that companies ditch the plastic and go for the biodegradable options. Did you know that plastic is actually worth more than steel? Plastic Bank is turning plastic into a currency for people in developing countries that lack recycling infrastructure. The plastic waste is traded in at locally run collection centers for cash, digital tokens, or vouchers for daily essentials. Their aim is not to only clean up the environment, but to also make social impact by providing decent revenue opportunities for low-income people, the so-called unbankable populations who might not have access to a banking account to deposit and grow their money, or even conventional loans. Plastic Bank then takes the recycled plastic and turns it into social plastic, and they resell it to larger CPG brands and conglomerates such as Henkel and SC Johnson, who have committed to using social plastic in their products' packaging. In countries like Haiti, communities are using plastic profits to fund solar, electricity, and even education projects. Using technology to combat apathy. One of the main issues we're facing is apathy. How do we make people care? Or overcome the feeling of being so overwhelmed when we think of these issues that we do nothing and just go back to our day-to-day. Many people feel like they're far removed from the oceans. Not everyone lives near an ocean to understand firsthand its beauty and impact on our lives. So how can a technology like VR impact ocean literacy and create empathy and self-efficacy? Dr. Erica Woolsey has been working with the Virtual Human Interaction Lab at Stanford University to recreate an underwater diving experience in VR. It's called the Hydras for Oculus. It's actually available for free. She says not everyone lives near an ocean, but VR can bring the ocean to them. And the responses have been outstanding. People, including experienced divers, say it feels real and that it makes them want to work to protect marine ecosystems, like coral reefs. I personally know someone that was inspired to immediately go and learn to to get scuba certified after experiencing the hydrous. The team is looking to get more scientific about their results, and they're working with researchers to study how immersive virtual experiences can affect ocean empathy and the desire to act in the benefit of the oceans. It's a 2-year NFS-funded study that just began, so we'll see how that goes. I also think that art and events have a huge ability to impact people and their apathy. This event I recently attended, called Planet Home, brought scientists like Bill Nye together on stage with artists like Snoop Dogg, activists and actors like Adrian Grenier, entrepreneurs, investors, and visual artists. You'll see there that there's an art temple on the left where anyone can participate in drawing live models. They had interactive exhibits that included an interactive tour of the carbon cycle, a meditation lounge with sounds from the rainforest, VR experiences such as the hydrous, and so much more that really helped to bring back the awe and wonder of nature, and why it's something so precious to be preserved. This is one of my favorite images. It's by Jeremy McCain, who I mentioned earlier, the founder of the Ocean Currency Network. He's also a visual artist, and he takes amazing underwater photographs, and I encourage you all to check out his work. There's so many other technologies that I didn't get into, such as how the shipping industry is retrofitting its existing ships with technology to enable autonomy. These systems are made up of sensors and cameras, and then they can apply machine learning to identify objects taken from a continuous stream of information that's gathered around the vessel's surroundings. These systems can identify and track potential issues ahead of time, such as not crashing into a pier or other objects like marine life. A project that I worked on was building floating islands for the people of the South Pacific that will need to adapt to rising seas. These islands were concepted and the technologies exist to put them into place. Things like algae farms to sustain populations, living roofs, and wave energy technology. There's even technologies that turn waste into pure energy and water. OTEC, which stands for Ocean Thermal Energy Conversion, uses the difference in temperature from deep cold water and warm surface water to create energy. Clearly, not all the solutions that I presented are pure tech solutions, and that's because the truth is, technology alone cannot save the oceans. It needs to be a combination of solutions put into action together, ranging from technical to ecological, plus our collective will. Some of those non-technical solutions include the creation of more marine protected areas, getting to the Sustainable Development Goal of 30% of the world's oceans protected by the year 2030. More coral planting. You can adopt a coral with coral gardeners in Tahiti and track its growth, or you can even go and personally track it plant it on a Tahitian reef. Picking up trash at your local beach, organizing a cleanup, planting mangroves, which protect the coastlines and prevent erosion. They also protect against rising seas, and they filter water, as well as being a carbon sink. Seaweed farms, which are a carbon sink and a food source, an alternative to fishing, and they also create economic benefit for local communities. There's also an alternative to plastics that's made with seaweed called Bolyware, which I forgot to mention. Developing more circular economies, such as marine attacks and plastic bank. Policy changes, demanding change, such as stopping of fossil fuel subsidies, getting into politics yourself, eating less meat and fish, and this is actually something I have Jason to thank for since our conversation, which really impacted me. I've actually stopped eating seafood, also just seeing so many of these stats. I do still eat invasive species like lionfish and oysters, which are cleaners. And I think another thing that I personally have done is grow my own food. I have what I call a micro farm. It's actually just a plot in a local garden. But I think just being closer to your food source and seeing that food from seedling to your plate is something that just really gets you closer and more conscious as a consumer of food. And also being more active and vocal as a consumer. As I mentioned, demanding that these companies start to change over to these biodegradable options, especially when it comes to plastic. Planting trees. The point is that we can all and should all do something. We can all be more courageous as well. So thank you all for your attention. I hope it's been interesting and inspiring and given you some hope and ideas for how you want to put your own superpowers to use to help us save the oceans.
So we have some time for some Q&A, so I'll just, if you have a question, please insert it in.
So that first company you mentioned, like $100,000 to go in that.
Aquatica?
Yeah.
Mhm.
So do they take into account like the noise pollution that they?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm not exactly sure how much noise their subs make. That's something I can definitely bring back to them since I do work with them. It just actually hasn't been something that's come up. I do think that they are using sustainable practices in the construction of their subs, but it's a matter of how far these technologies are advanced as well.
In general, those are pretty low.
But they definitely, in their future, they do plan to have systems that are not run on fossil fuels and gas and things like that. Yeah.
You might be outside of your purview, but did you know, or did Barbara Block elaborate on what she found in the White Shark Cafe? What species that they were feeding on?
I don't know specifically what species. I know that the behavior that they were witnessing when they went there was a bizarre behavior that they hadn't witnessed in sharks before, and that the sharks were diving and going up and having these vertical patterns which were not normal for sharks. So that was sort of what drew the attention of the Balcor and was able to enable them to identify that there was actually food sources there. Yeah.
You mentioned that you worked with like building floating islands.
Yeah.
And I was just curious, like, was that with specific island nations, or like, and if it was, like, how was it perceived by the islanders themselves? And
Yeah,
was that very successful so far?
It hasn't been successful. It's a company called Blue Frontiers, and they had an MOU with the government of French Polynesia. And there was definitely an outcry. I think that because to get to an MVP of a project of that nature, you really have to build in waters that are not the open water. Eventually their idea was that they wanted to be in open water, but to get to an MVP, they needed to be closer to shore. And so yes, there was definitely an outcry by the local population that found out that their lagoon was going to be used for this construction, and they didn't want to have an island in their midst. And I'm not sure where it's gone. I think that they've kind of changed their strategy a little bit. That particular project is also tied to an ideology of self-governance, which I think is also problematic for many governments, as you can imagine. Yeah?
Do you know if any of these new technologies are being tested locally, like in the Monterey Bay?
I don't know if they're a lot of the technologies that I spoke of are local technologies. For example, Sail Drone is in Alameda. I'm trying to think of which other ones I mentioned. But there's definitely a lot of innovation that's happening here, and I imagine, with Mbari, there's a lot of things that are happening there. I know that there's some really cool stuff that we didn't even get into, like the eDNA, which is basically you can take a water sample and you can find out what species have been in that water from the eDNA of the water, which is really cool as well. It's a new innovation as well. Yeah.
Thank you for bringing a list of the technologies and things that are making a difference here. If the theme tonight is focused on private sector solutions, I'm curious if you would just sort of give an overview of how you see the public sector role, or what the optimal role of the government or public sector is in facilitating these companies' solutions and things, private solutions, or in a larger sense of being a catalyst for change.
I think that it would be great if we had governments that were willing to, be active in those changes. I can't really speak too much to the governmental sector. I've been, more involved in the private, and it's, I think, more a matter of people just wanting to, especially these entrepreneurs, wanting to take action into their own hands. A lot of the government activity, unfortunately, is military. So a lot of the companies that I know of, especially on the robotics side, they have military contracts. And things like mapping the ocean seabed is 2021. But I know that the military is also recognizing the fact that climate change is going to impact their operations. I can only speak to the fact that I would encourage people to be more involved in politics at a local level and a national level to try to impact that change that we need. Things like, stopping funding fossil fuel activity and encouraging more funding or subsidies of clean energy and things like that. Yeah? Did you want to follow up?
I don't want to take from other people, but I did. I guess to further on that point, I've been just sort of personally involved in a specific technology, but it's related to what you were saying around militarization, where we've run into issues of appropriating our technologies and nationalizing certain technologies when they have a militaristic advantage.
Mm-hmm.
And so is that having
Yeah.
a large adverse effect? Or?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these companies are small startups, so, having a large military contract or large government contract is something that is attractive to them. I mean, we see a company like Ole's Robotics, a lot of their applications could be military applications, especially things like the munitions cleanup. I know that personally their CEO has taken a pledge to only do work that is beneficial to the ocean rather than harmful. So, yeah, I think it's, a matter of ethics for each of these companies and the values that they have, that they stand by. Yeah.
I'm curious about the ropeless crab and lobster traps.
Yeah,
How
sure.
scalable are they? And how close are they to being deployed at this point? It's a lot more expensive than traditional gear.
Yes.
It's kind of feasible pricing.
Right. But what they have is also the ability to retrofit existing crab and lobster cages.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that that is one option for fishermen that do want to engage in sustainable practices in a way that is more cost effective, and eventually transition to the fully autonomous model, or it's not autonomous, but the fully remote model.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you have any connections, since you're from the Bay Area, to the ocean cleanup?
Yeah, we don't have connections to the ocean cleanup. It's definitely a project that's gotten quite a lot of visibility and awareness and funding. I mentioned the Ocean Voyages Institute because that's actually a project that's been successful in actually taking plastic out of the ocean. So they collected 40 tons, and we'll see where the ocean cleanup goes. Their first attempt wasn't successful. But, I wish them all the best and all the luck that they can get. And they have a lot of money, so hopefully they'll be able to innovate their technology to a point of it being effective. Yeah?
Are the coral growers breeding any coral that is going to sustain in higher temperature waters that we're going to be subjected to over the next 30 years? I mean, if we're going to lose our coral reefs in 30 years, is it possible that we plant the world's corals to be able to equal what we're going to lose?
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely taking into account the coral that is more resilient to higher temperatures and focused on those. So that's not a guarantee, of course, and who knows, how much water temperature will go up, but they are looking at the more resilient corals.
So we'll lose certain species of corals to focus on species of corals that are going to be able to adapt to
Yes.
our pollution problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
So of all these new ideas that you're exposed to, what are some that you're the most excited about?
Well, I mean, you've seen all the ones that I'm excited about because they're presented here in this presentation. I am a fangirl of Aquatica, big time. I'm a fangirl of Quai. I just really love their fish. It's, I think, one of the coolest things. And that robot, the Ocean One robot, I think is super, super cool. So, yeah, all the technologies that I presented are ones that I'm really excited about.
Do you have a place where all of those companies are listed that you're involved with? Is it on your...
The ones that I have a professional relationship with are on my website, Blue Economy Agency, and these others are friends and companies that I've just run across that I think have really cool technologies that have the potential to be really impactful.
And are you doing the PR for all of them? I mean, are you...
No. Aquatica is a company that I work with, and also Monaco Better World Forum that I mentioned as well.
Maybe as a follow-up to
And
that
then I
is,
just have friends like Jeremy McCain, who's a buddy from the Ocean Currency Network, and so, you know, I promote his work a little bit.
it just maybe as a follow-up to that, are there any kind of centralized depositories or something where, something like this, where it's kind of a flavor of all the full spectrum technologies people can go look at, or is this, you have to kind of piece it together?
Yeah, nothing like that that I know of exists. I'm trying to think of BNP Paribas Bank is really active in the space and investing in ocean tech, and they put out a really good report on different ocean technologies, so there might be some kind of like Lumascape that they do around ocean technologies, but you know, I've done it personally. I have like a spreadsheet, and I know other people have little spreadsheets as well, but we haven't necessarily combined our efforts to make something public facing. That might be something, you know, for the future that we do.
All right, well, I think with that, we'll hang out for a few minutes here if anyone wants to introduce themselves and have a few words, and thanks again.
Yeah, thank you.